Hi there. Good day to everyone. Thank you. I'm Rodney Sobin at NASEO. Thank you for joining us. We are very excited to share with you some of the next steps with respect to the Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings Working Group, particularly on technical assistance for the working group states. But before getting to that, a little bit on logistics. All the attendees are muted. After the presentation, if you have any questions, please use the question box or the raise hand symbol to be recognized and unmuted. Either of those will work. We do encourage discussion and feedback. Unfortunately, this is a short half-hour call, so if there are questions afterwards, we would be glad to discuss them. Ooh, noise. So I should mention before we begin with the substance that, again, this is a NASEO NARUC partnership, and we are very grateful to have that partnership with our colleagues at NARUC. But let me go into a brief recap, and then we'll go to Natalie for the main show, which is about the technical assistance offerings. So this is, you have seen this slide before, just a recap of what the purpose of the working group is. It's to work with you in the states to raise awareness and provide education and exchange on grid interactive efficient buildings and related load flexibility. Really, the bold print in the bottom is the bottom line, literally in that case. The idea is to inform state planning, policy, regulations, and programs so you and your states can move forward as you wish on this topic. And you've seen this as well too. I do want to note and provide a special welcome to Nebraska and Washington State, which have recently joined the working group. There are some other inquiries, so you may be joined by a number of other jurisdictions as well. So let's quickly move on to Natalie Mims-Frick, who will discuss technical assistance for the states and what the offerings and opportunities are and what the options are. So take it away, Natalie.
Thanks, Rod, and thanks, Maddie. Can you advance me to the next slide? I'm Natalie Mims-Frick with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and I wanted to give a little bit of context before I started talking about the prioritized topics that you guys have provided input on. So as most of you know, we had a working group call last month, and I shared information about the technical assistance that the Department of Energy is going to offer. And then I also introduced 8 different potential technical assistance topics. And after that, NASEO emailed you and asked you for feedback on the topic, specifically if you had any active or planned pilots, projects, programs, or proceedings. I couldn't think of any other words that started with P. And also what technical assistance topics you were most interested in. And today I'm going to share those results, and I also wanted to thank everyone who responded to that and is on the call today. So next slide, please. So out of the 8 topics that we have listed, these are the top 4, and it's basically lead by example, actions to advance demand flexibility in publicly owned buildings, assessing potential impacts of grid interactive efficient buildings on utility system loads, evaluation methods for utility system planning, and pilot programs to demonstrate and validate load flexibility approaches. And we're going to address 3 or 4 of these topics this year. And then next year, because this is part of a 2-year technical assistance offering, we'll address new topics, and they could be these other ones that we're not able to work on today, or they could also be new topics that we talk about over the next year. So next slide, please. I wanted to highlight some of the examples of what working group members are doing that are related to our selected topics right now. And so I asked our working group co-chairs, Casey Radcliffe and Hannah Terwillinger, I hope I pronounced that right, Hannah, to speak about, Casey's going to speak about the Oregon Public Utility Commission's distribution system planning docket, and it addresses many topics, including valuation. And Minnesota's Geotargeting program, Hannah's going to talk about that. That focuses on efficiency and demand response to defer distribution system upgrades. And then I also asked Alicia Noriaga from NYSERDA to tell us more about their demand flexibility feasibility study. So I think Maddie's going to unmute all three of your lines, and we can just go in this order. So Casey, if you could start us off with telling us about the evaluation methods.
Hi, everybody. Again, Casey Radcliffe with Oregon Department of Energy. And I traditionally work in the building efficiency space, so it was interesting for me to start connecting with our sister agency at the Utility Commission about the upcoming PUC docket. So the docket I'm referring to is UM 2005. And this PUC docket ties together actually 2 or 3 existing dockets, one on smart grid, which is requiring utilities to report on their smart grid efforts, and then a storage docket requiring our largest IOUs to procure energy storage. And this kind of master docket would combine and aggregate multiple dockets relating to distribution system planning, like the smart grid and storage dockets. And the hope here is to develop a more holistic regulatory planning process and increase procedural efficiencies for utilities, but also in recognition that many of these what was considered distinct efforts actually fall into a larger spectrum of utility distributed system planning. And the overlap with grid and active buildings really comes into play when we look at the topics that are going to be talked about. Their first phase, this baselining phase, is going to include some workshops and development of guidance that will eventually be adopted for utilities to file into their distributed system plans. Some of those topics that really have some GEB overlap include automation, AMI, microgrids, storage, DERs, not-on-wire alternatives, and then cost allocation and valuation methods. And in that second phase, the assessment phase, establishing individual utility dockets, we're really going to see those valuation methodologies come into play. So eventually at this phase, it will result in the PUC accepting each of these individual distributed system plans, and those valuation methods will be wrapped into those plans. So some of those methods that are under consideration right now are valuation of distributed capacity and avoided cost. So when upgrading distribution infrastructure, how to line that up with grid and building modernization efforts. The second is locational net benefit analysis of DERs, including some value and cost related to efficiency and the buildings and energy devices themselves, playing into a cost and avoided cost methodology. And then lastly, connecting with existing methodologies used in utility IRPs and the work on advancing valuation through actually more granular forecast and valuation methods, which are currently, it's a long-term process that doesn't really encapsulate short-term utility needs. And so this evolving valuation method in the IRP process will likely impact the PUC's methodology that they'll use in this larger docket. So it's still in the very early stages. They are still in that baselining phase. If you look up the UM 2005, you can see some of the staff documents in there. And they're going to be holding some workshops in February to capture utility perspective and stakeholder perspectives around this baselining and valuation methodology. So still early, but an example of a topic that is of high interest in Oregon and clearly for other states as well.
Great, thanks, Casey. Hannah, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm going to talk briefly about a geotargeting pilot that's being run by a local energy nonprofit in partnership with our largest utility, Xcel Energy. And so the idea behind this is to use existing energy efficiency and demand response programs to defer distribution upgrade, mainly a transformer and feeder upgrade in a specific area of Xcel Minnesota's distribution system. And so I think what's interesting about this is they weren't exploring necessarily new ways of doing things, but seeing if they could do additional outreach to get additional customers in the area to sign up. And so they were looking to defer 500 kilowatts, which would only defer the upgrade a year, but I think it's more of a test to see how it would work. And they did get some early results back, but there were some challenges, especially looking at existing programs with how the sales cycle for business customers goes, because they are going to be making these types of investments on a longer time frame than what the pilot had. And so I think that's really interesting to inform GEB work, because a lot of times in the utility world, we can think of things having to move at the utility pace. But when you're starting to involve more customers-centric approaches, they're going to have different timeframes, different investment decisions than the utility does, and that might not align with the need or the way that things need to line up. And so this is almost the opposite of Casey getting involved in PUC process. This is more on our Department of Commerce, on our state energy office side, working with our energy efficiency programs. And so this didn't go through a docket per se because it existed within existing energy efficiency programs. And so we will keep getting reports on this in Minnesota's Integrated Distribution System Plan. So that's where the current report is, and that's Minnesota PUC docket number 19666. And then one other interesting note is they looked to test existing demand response, but we had a cooler than usual summer. And so they found it difficult to actually find the time to test some new protocols around demand response. And so I think those are, sometimes you see these small operational challenges when you're doing pilots and testing out technologies that I think are useful to think about as you're going through and thinking about what GEB projects or GEB pilots you can test out, because you can't really test the impact of using air conditioning controls if no one really needs to use their air conditioning because it's a cooler than usual summer. But they'll continue the pilot through next year, and we will get to see further results of that.
Thanks, Hannah. And Alicia, do we have Alicia's line unmuted?
I see Alicia is on the line. Alicia, are you there? I'm not sure if you're connected to our audio or not. She joined us relatively recently, so she might not be fully logged in yet.
Okay, well, we can come back to her and let her give us an update on their NYSERDA's activities. Maybe we'll try again in a couple minutes, because the demand flexibility feasibility study I think is pretty interesting. In the meantime, we can go on to the next slide, which is my last slide that I have to present on. And Maddie, did you want people to, we're going to have question and answer after this. Do you want people to use the chat box for that, or were we going to unmute people's lines and let people talk?
Whatever is the preferred method of the audience. If they're more comfortable typing, they're welcome to type. If they'd rather share out loud, I can unmute their line. Up to them.
So those who wish to speak should use the raise hand symbol, so we don't unmute all the attendees and have some noise problems. So please use the raise hand or use the question box to pose a question or to say that you'd like to speak.
Okay, great. So in terms of our next steps, NASEO is going to send out another email to all of you, and we would like you to indicate which of these 4 topics you're interested in, would like to be part of the working group, and the level of time commitment that you can offer for each one of the topics. And we'll provide some general guidance about what time commitment means, low, medium, high, and kind of what we're thinking that means, just as general guidance. And so we want to hear back from you by Friday, January 31st on that. And NASEO will send an email out maybe today or tomorrow, so shortly. And you can participate in as many of the topics as you'd like. And we would like you to identify your time commitment for each one of the topics so that we know if one is you're going to be able to spend more time on than another. And then in terms of next steps on our side, we're going to identify experts to lead each one of these topic working groups early next month. And then we're going to form our working groups in February or March, and I'm anticipating that we'll have our first call for each one of the topic working groups by March. So we'll get things rolling pretty quickly here. So did we figure out if we could let Alicia talk yet, or is that still work in progress?
Alicia, if you're there, I unmuted your line. Doesn't sound like we've got it quite worked out yet.
Okay. And did we have any questions from any of our states or anybody participating on the phone yet?
Yes, we have a question, and I hope you folks don't mind that I'm sharing the names of people who are typing the questions. Lindsay asks if there will be grant funding available for projects.
So we are providing technical assistance, which I don't think, that's a good question. I don't know the exact answer. I don't think that the technical assistance money can be used for grant funding, but I know that Monica Newcomb's on the line, who's our DOE partner, and maybe if she can answer that question, we could ask her that, or I can follow up offline and get back to you.
Monica, you're unmuted if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to understand what is meant by grant funding and, the amount and how it would be applied. But generally speaking, we aren't thinking of direct funds to states to, go directly like to a project, if that's what you mean by grant funding. I would think of the technical assistance more as resources or help with analysis on a specific issue.
Great, thank you. And did we have any other questions that came in?
Yeah, this is Rodney. So you had meant, I wanted to reiterate a point that you made that states can opt for more than one option. So of the choices available, it can be more than one. And I do want to say that the time commitment is not a hard, we're going to track labor hours or anything like that. It's an estimation. So we know if there is a very strong interest and maybe some projects that may be pending for which you need assistance or looking for help versus, or I should say in contrast to somewhat less of, more participating in webinars and such. Is that fair, Natalie?
Yeah, I think, by helping us understand how much time you can spend on this technical assistance, it'll help us craft our deliverables and make sure that we're providing you with what you're interested in and what you need.
We just want to make sure that each state is participating to the level of comfort that it wishes, and we want as much participation as you are interested and able to provide and is useful for you.
Great. And any other questions or comments coming in?
That seems to be it. I'll reiterate, if any of you have questions afterwards, please feel free to contact us, whether via email or phone, and we will be responsive to that. Again, we at NASEO will send pretty soon, by the end of this, maybe by tomorrow, an email to each of the states' contacts requesting your interest in which groups you'd like to be part of, and again, that estimation of time commitment, and then we will work from there. I would also note that this will be posted and the links will be provided to you. I think there are some later slides which recapitulate some resources that are available, which you may look at your leisure. And also a reminder that at the NASEO GEB Working Group web pages, we have a resources page. There are some new additions, and after I get back to my desk, there will be an additional item placed on it. So we hope those are useful.
Yeah, and we still have a few minutes left on the call. I just wanted to see if any of the other states wanted to share any of the work that they're doing. We got a lot of responses about projects and pilots and programs that states are working on that are related to these topics. I know that I saw we have Michigan on the line. They have the Michigan Power Grid Initiative. I don't know if David wants to comment on that, and it has a pilot component. Hawaii, I saw, was on the line, and they have one of their energy efficiency program administrators' stated objectives is to transform buildings into smart, resilient grid resources. So we wanted to talk more about that. And New Jersey, I think I saw was on the line, and they have an energy master plan, and they're hoping to have a responsive smart grid with interactions between the utility delivery system and buildings. So I don't know if any of you want to volunteer to tell us more about your topics. I'm sure that would be of interest to other people on the call.
So, David, I unmuted your line if there's anything you want to say or add to the conversation.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
We can.
I'm not very familiar with what the Michigan Public Service Commission is doing with the various work groups, but it's my understanding for the pilot work group, it's more basic in terms of setting up a process, procedures, and methods for evaluating future pilots and how the utilities should be looking at and evaluating their pilots in the future at this point. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. And did Ashley from Hawaii, did you want to add anything about the Energy Efficiency Program Administrator? I am calling on these people randomly without letting them know in advance, so feel free to decline, but I did find these were topics that were interesting, and so I just thought it might be nice to hear more about them.
Yes, hi, can you hear me? This is Ashley.
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, great. So I really can't speak to too much today on this call, and I would certainly be happy to come more prepared for a future call or in one of the working group discussions. But yes, in the recent triennial plan that was submitted by Hawaii Energy, our energy efficiency administrator, in which they included a 3-year plan with 7 objectives, 2 of which did have sort of a focus on smart buildings, one of which specifically addressing their objective to include and improve programming or focus on ways that Hawaii can incorporate grid services that focus on the use of smart buildings and services to the grid. So again, I'd be happy to provide more information. It's still kind of in like an early development stage, exploratory, but we're excited that this is part of the planning for the next 3 years. And I'm sure being involved with this group for myself and the folks from our state energy office, this will certainly help support their efforts too. But I'm happy to come more prepared with maybe even identifying some specific projects that they have ready to roll out.
Oh, that was great. Thank you. And does anybody else have anything that they'd like to share? We have a few more minutes. Otherwise, we can end early, but I just thought it was really great, all of the different actions that everybody shared in their response to these questions. And I think it's helpful for your colleagues and peers to hear about what's going on. So I thought this might be a nice time to use that.
Yeah, Tom in New Jersey, I unmuted your line if you'd like to add anything.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, we were looking at this more and how it'll relate to our energy master plan. And considering it looks like there'll be an announcement on that next week, it wouldn't be proper for me to make any official comments on it right now. But what I can say is, during the development of that, we were definitely excited to see the GEB option and be invited to this group, because we're really thinking that we can incorporate, and I know that there were drafts to incorporate this kind of methodology and these technologies into the whole energy efficiency and energy reduction and demand reduction that the state is ultimately going for. So, similar to Hawaii, I think after that's released, I can probably give a little bit more details on what we're thinking. And I'll be flat out honest with you too. We're looking for guidance and help just the same way, how best this can be implemented.
Great, thank you. And thanks to everybody who shared. I really appreciate that. Maddie, do we have any other questions that came in or any other follow-ups that we want to talk about before we conclude our phone call?
No new questions, and apologies to Alicia. We can't quite get the audio to work, but maybe we can have you share New York's examples at a later date. But for now, the audio connection doesn't seem to be working for her.
Okay, I guess if we don't have any other questions or comments, we'll look for your feedback to the email that's forthcoming from NASEO and letting us know which topics you want to be in a working group on and how much time you can commit to that. And thank you again to everybody and to DOE for funding this effort and NASEO for hosting and herding the cats along, making sure we're all on the phone call at the right time.
Well, thank you, Natalie, and thanks to Monica and colleagues at DOE, and thanks also to our NARUC colleagues for our partnership, and obviously, of course, thanks to all of you for your participation. We're looking forward to working with you in this very exciting portion of the working group's activities. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.